Morning, everybody. So that takes care of the first two bullet points. Before I joined the content ecosystem team at Google, I worked at YouTube for 4 years, helping to make YouTube fast. That was a really great experience, but I'm excited in my new role because it's not focusing on one particular website's performance. It has to do with the performance and the state and health of the web. I'm also a co-author of this book using WordPress Stats, which I'll talk about the tool a little bit later. I like to think of myself as like a web researcher or like a data scientist. The tools that I use are kind of like big data tools, and a lot of my time is spent just trying to figure out like what is it trying to tell me. And so in this talk, I'm sharing with you some of the things that I've found in this big data, specifically through the WordPress lens. So I'm going to start with a stat, and there's going to be many big numbers on the screen, but I want to start off with 80%. This is known as the golden rule of web performance. 80% of load time, as experienced by the user, is on the front end. And this is like after the HTML page has loaded. This is the JavaScript loading, parsing, execution, image loading, CSS loading, painting, the ads loading. Like, there's a lot that has to happen on the front end. And I think a lot of people, when they think about page load, think maybe just about back-end performance. Database lookup time. The server needs to prepare the response. Maybe it's all like network time as well, like DNS lookups, SSL negotiation, making the connection on TCP. But there's a lot also going on the front end. This was coined by Steve Souders as recent as 2012. He's known as like the godfather in the field of web performance optimization. And this stat came out before client-side rendering really became popular, and that was like offloading more work from the server to the client side. So I think this stat is even more true today. Maybe we were up to 90%, who knows? So before I even get into like the stats, I want to address something up front. Why performance even matters. Why does it matter that a page loads in 5 seconds? What's the difference if it loads in 10 seconds? Who cares? Does anybody want to like throw out an idea of why performance even matters? Because Google's going to start taking it into account in search rankings. Yeah.
People will stop waiting and go somewhere else.
People will go somewhere else if it takes too long to load. Was there any other? Competitors load faster. These are really, really good answers. For anybody who was at Kinsey's keynote yesterday, he said something that was kind of put a bug in my head about a way to think about performance. And it's in the context of the shift from digital news or shift from analog news to digital news. And when you think about the user experience in a digital news type of environment, you're just picking up a newspaper and starting to read it, and all the content is there. You don't have to wait for anything to load. Can you imagine what it would be like if the analog newspaper experience was anything like digital, where you pick up the newspaper and it's blank for a few seconds, and then like it loads in Times New Roman, and then all of a sudden it changes to this nice fancy font, and then like an image sort of like stutters in, and then the ad comes in and then just jarringly shifts the content down. Like, that would be intolerable. So why do we tolerate that on the web? If I picked up a newspaper and it did that, I would throw it away. Like, what the hell's up with that newspaper? But like, I'd read somebody else's newspaper. And my advertisers wouldn't like that anyway, like if I'm throwing away the newspaper. So hopefully that will set the stage for why performance matters. It's all about the user experience. And if the users are not happy, they're going to go to a competitor. They're not going to see the ads. The advertisers are not going to make their money. Advertisers won't, advertise on your website. You won't make money from that. So really, it's the situation where it lifts all ships when web performance is fast. So yeah, performance is correlated with business metrics like revenue and conversions. If you want people to sign up for your product or to, buy your things that you're selling or see the ads on your page. WPO Stats is a website that showcases a lot of these statistics. For example, like Pinterest, decreased wait time by 40%, increased SEO traffic by 15%, increased conversion rate to sign up 15%. And this website is just filled with anecdotes like this. Google recently released a tool, the Revenue Impact Calculator. This is specifically for mobile, where you plug in your domain. It'll tell you what Google knows about your web performance, although you can, if you know better, you can plug that in. Average monthly visitors, order value, and conversion rate. And it does some magic using aggregate data from Google Analytics to predict if you were to increase your performance, how much more money could you make? It's amazing to put it in these terms because as a developer like myself, I just know I need to make my site faster. Until it's instantaneous, I'm not done. But if you're not empowered to care about web performance, like what's the point? You can't really do anything. Your hands are tied. So this is a really helpful tool to convince the powers that be that performance directly correlates with that bottom line. And when you put it in these terms, I think it is very motivating to see it in dollars and cents. Every site is different. Like this is just an estimation, but generally, like faster means better conversions. I highly encourage you, if you're going to do performance improvements, test it against this, and if you see anything different, publish it on WPO Stats. Run your own case studies like that. Faster performing sites on mobile will rank higher, all other factors being equal. In January, Google announced that page speed is going to be a ranking factor. This is a really big deal if you weren't already caring about web performance. SEO is a very motivating factor as well. And there's this thing called AMP. And on Google search results, there's a carousel of news. And today, only AMP pages are eligible. And Malta Ubel, the TL of AMP, said that they're looking into objective performance and user experience data, for example, the Chrome User Experience Report, as a way of determining eligibility. So it's not that you need to be using a certain technology. It's if you're fast, they want to include and showcase these types of websites. So some more stats. Our users are at a disadvantage. 60% of mobile connections are 2G speeds. We can do all we want to improve performance, but we can't really change the reality that our users are on slow connections. So 60% are on 2G-like connections, but it doesn't help that we're loading more and more stuff on our web pages. This is a graph from HTTP Archive showing the trend since 2011 of desktop and mobile. And mobile's on the bottom, and you can actually see it's creeping closer and closer to desktop. They're almost converging. And the median page weight is like 1.5 megabytes. Do the math. 2G is like 70 kilobits per second. So if you take like 1.5 megabytes and divide it and do the math, I think it takes 3 minutes to load the median web page on 2G. Somebody help me out with the math. But that's frightening. And you can kind of see the faint areas around the lines. Those are like the 25th and 75th percentile. The 75th is even higher. It's like 2 megabytes. So you can imagine like the confluence of these problems. Users are on slow connections, and we're putting more on the pages requiring from our users to load. 53% of users abandon a site that takes longer than 3 seconds to load. Again, this is not helped by the fact that our websites take really long to load. Over 3 seconds is the 50th percentile for mobile. And there's a very long tail of slow performance. So 3 seconds is about here. Look at all of that to the right. So that's kind of frightening. We're at a disadvantage. Our users are at a disadvantage. 35% of desktop experiences are slower than 3 seconds, 52 on mobile. OK, so hopefully you all care about performance now. So how do we measure it? There's 2 different categories, like lab and field, personal and public. So I'll go into each. And I'm going to use kind of like a grid to explain it, 2-dimensional. And we have a bunch of tools that we can look into. So the first, lab metrics. Or lab tools, these help us analyze how a website is built. For example, is this website using WordPress? Or how many bytes does it load? Does it use a CDN? Are images optimized? Contrast this with field tools. This helps us understand the user experience. If you've used Google Analytics, for example. You can learn about the users. Are they on desktop or mobile? Are they using Wi-Fi or 3G or 2G? Fast or slow page load experience. But you can also learn about what pages they visit. You can learn about how far into the conversion funnel they went before they abandoned. So let's dive into a couple of personal tools, starting with web page test. So this is a tool you can run on your website or any website and learn a lot about how it's built. You can see at the top is a bunch of report card style grades. It'll tell you the things that you're doing really well, if you need to improve anything. These are the inexcusable performance must-haves. So if you see an F here, you should probably think about fixing that. It also has a table with the time it took to load, the number of requests, the number of bytes. This is a really good upper limit for the number of bytes and number of requests. Because web page test is running from a particular location somewhere, it's not necessarily representative of your user experience. You just kind of pick a test configuration out of thin air. And unless you're calibrating that with your real user data, who knows how representative this is. So the time stuff, I wish it didn't even exist, because I think it makes people kind of feel complacent. Oh, great, my site takes 3.6 seconds to load. Great, but if your users are on 2G and you're not doing 2G tests, it's completely irrelevant. It also has this waterfall, and I think this is the most powerful part of the tool. The waterfall shows you pretty much like a log of the network. What was requested? When was it requested? How long did it take? The DNS, TCP, SSL, server response time, network response time. And also the order and what was blocking on the network. And it's color-coded too, so you can see these three are fonts loading pretty early on, but you have a bunch of JavaScript loading before that. Is the JavaScript necessary to show something on the page? If not, this is telling you you need to reorder or reprioritize. And it looks like a Google API here. Is that even necessary? Some third-party tool. Who knows? So on the field side, we have tools like Google Analytics. These are great for understanding how users experience the site as a whole. Real user measurement, or RUM, doesn't really care about how pages are built. It just measures the user experience. So it'll show you where your users are from, what their page load performance is. Also, Google Analytics tells you page load performance, but in terms of averages, and averages suck. I wish this was a median page load time. There's a anecdote about Bill Gates walks into a bar, and for the people who have been having drinks with me this week, I've told this story a couple of times. So Bill Gates walks into a bar. Before he walks in, the average net worth is, I don't know, $100,000, let's just say. Bill Gates walks into the bar. Now the average net worth is billions of dollars. That outlier just totally skews that average. If we were to look at a median, that number wouldn't change very much, because a bar full of people will not really be skewed by that outlier. So this is where I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the state of the web, using these public tools. And these are tools that help us understand the ecosystem as a whole. These are tools that scale up to hundreds of thousands or millions of websites. In the case of HTTP Archive, it's using web page test. Web page test runs a single site at a time, but if we fan out and do that over hundreds of thousands of sites, then we get an understanding of, we can get, for example, that stat, 1.5 megabytes is the median page weight. And that comes from this chart. So we can get these high-level insights. And httparchive.org is where you can go, and for some of you who have your laptops out, just visit the site and browse some of these stats. You'd be surprised at where we are today as a web community. So people use it for all kinds of things, sobering observations about the state of the web. A couple of years, Wired ran this story. The average web page is now the size of the original Doom game. That's frightening. But also keep in mind, they're talking about averages. This was 2.39 megs. You'll remember 1.5 megs is the median. But still, like it's crazy to see what people get out of this tool. Academics use it for research. If they want to, let's say, understand HTTPS adoption, this will tell them of 500,000 websites, how many sites are using HTTPS. And also, like, standardization bodies use it to understand adoption of APIs. If they want to deprecate something, how widespread is its use? So it runs on 500,000 websites, taken from the Alexa Top Million, every other week. And it's on the Internet Archive backbone. It's like a nonprofit organization. And it's using web page test under the hood with 134 virtual machines, just continuously testing websites. And the data that it collects is put on the Google Cloud using BigQuery and cloud storage. And this is what enables us to do this type of research. We can write queries against this database and extract insights, like tell me the median page weight, or give me all of the websites that include cryptocurrency mining JavaScript with a .edu domain. And you'd learn some pretty scary things from that. The Chrome UX report is a collection of real user performance data from Chrome users. And it's basically just histograms of performance data, distributions of performance. So between 0 and 200 milliseconds, 20% of the user experience had a first contentful paint in that bin. And it's collected from users all around the world. It also includes dimensions like what type of device did the user use? Was it desktop, phone, or tablet? The effective connection type, 2G, 4G, offline. If a user is on Wi-Fi, but it's super duper slow, or if they're like tethered, it'll show up as 2G. It's the effective type, like what the speed actually really feels like. Their geography, broken down by country, and of course, user experience. I'll get to the exact metrics in a second. All this data is anonymized and aggregated. It's publicly accessible. And we take great pains to ensure that sites that don't want to be indexed by Google are not exposed in this report. The data is rolled up at the origin level. So for example, in the previous, you could see like HTTP example.com. That is one origin. HTTPS is another origin. So you can kind of see how they differ. Sites must meet a unique user threshold. So if they don't have enough, if Google doesn't have enough data about a specific origin, it's not going to be included. So if I have a website that only I visit, and it's like Rick's secret website / really super private stuff, nobody's going to see that I'm visiting that website and what my particular performance is. And in the analysis step, we mine the raw data on BigQuery. We can get URL resolution insights. For example, Rick's super secret page.html. If that was a public thing, you can get that performance data on PageSpeed Insights. The mobile speed scorecard is a thing, the same tool with that revenue impact calculator. And there are third-party integrations. We're working with Akamai so that you can see the real user performance of your competitors. You can see real user performance of your industry, and how that tracks against your real user performance of your own particular website. So the metrics we collect are first paint, first contentful paint, DOM content loaded, onload. And you can see as like a page progresses, it kind of means different things to the user. This is not a very helpful screen. It tells you nothing about what the user came to accomplish. For example, a search for Sundar. The first contentful paint is the first one that gives us something meaningful to look at. So this is the metric I really like to pay attention to. DOM content loaded is when the text has appeared. Onload is when the images have loaded. And that is usually the metric that people think of when they try to measure web performance. But onload is kind of like a really cold, unempathetic metric. It doesn't relate to the user experience. If there's images below the fold that the user is not even looking at, onload will wait until those images load before it fires. So FCP, or first content full paint, is my go-to metric. So, OK, all of that is to set the stage for the actual performance of WordPress. So how does WordPress perform using HTTP archive data? To understand this, we use a tool called Webalizer. Is anybody familiar with Webalizer? A couple people. It runs detections against a web page. It looks for things like WP content in URLs of resources, and little signatures, telltale signs of WordPress. HTTP archive tests 500,000 sites. Not all of them succeed, so we have 462,000 successful tests, and 199,000 are detected as WordPress. Doing the math, that's about 43%. Quick, what's the percent of websites that are WordPress on the web? 31%. So this is a higher, slightly higher. I don't know why that is. 2 reasons, and I want to prime you for the data that you're about to see. And the word is bias. There may be bias in this data. Possibly sites in the top 500,000 are more biased to be WordPress. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Maybe there was bias in the detection. I could have had a bug in the detection, or maybe it's just not as accurate as that could be. There could have been many false positives. So just keep that in mind, that the data that you're looking at has a lot of bias in it that is not immediately evident. So when we compare WordPress sites' stats against global, like web-wide stats, we could see how different it is. The median page weight of WordPress is like 1.9 megabytes. This is up 190K from the global. So WordPress sites load more stuff. So just follow along like the bottom, like this is the point. If you don't remember the numbers or understand what it's trying to tell you, the thing at the bottom will just make it a lot easier to understand. WordPress sites load more stuff. And when we look at the change over time, we can go back to January 2016. WordPress sites have grown in weight 20%. And this is slightly slower than the rate of change for the rest of the web. So that's a good sign. We can start breaking it down by resource type. For example, CSS, about 70K, 16K higher than the web as a whole. It's grown 60%, twice as fast as the rate of change for the rest of the web. One thing that I think helps my perspective is that I'm just like a data scientist. I'm just looking at this data. I'm making no judgments about why these may be the case. And I'm also not a WordPress expert. So I can't explain why these numbers are moving in the direction they are. Feel free to like shout out or raise your hand and be like, yeah, that seems like it's a problem with plugins or something. And I feel like plugins might be the answer to a lot of these questions. Which brings us to JavaScript. WordPress sites load 4 more JavaScript requests. 400K, and by the way, these are median desktop-only stats. The scripts are heavier on WordPress. I think this is a problem with plugins. Would you all agree? From what I've learned working with WordPress developers and builders is plugins don't always play well together. Sometimes they even load the same resources multiple times, different versions of the same resource even. Like it could be messy. JavaScript hasn't grown as quickly, but it's always been heavy. And that is a concerning thing in itself. With some of these growth stats, again, like I'll just kind of wonder why WordPress is not growing as much. Maybe the rest of the web is transitioning to WordPress, and it's kind of becoming more like the norm. So some positive stats. Gzip Savings on WordPress is slightly better than the rest of the web. Maybe this has to do with hosts. They're out of the box. They're more performant. But we're still not taking full advantage of Gzip compression. Gzip, for those who don't know, it just takes a text-based resource and compresses it in some way over the network. This is great for JavaScript and CSS, very redundant text-based stuff. And it also is showing more improvement. It's improved by 80% in 2 years. If these stats are flying by you and you want to absorb them, there's a link at the end so that you can view these slides. Images. I don't know if I can blame plugins for this one. So roughly the same number of images, WordPress and not WordPress. The median image weight on WordPress sites is about a megabyte. Keep in mind, half of WordPress sites have more images than a megabyte. And they get pretty crazy, 100K heavier, much heavier. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
All 40 images in one meg, or is this per image 1 meg?
Oh, is this per image, or is it like the sum of all of them? It's the accumulation of all images on a site. Images are not growing as much in weight as the rest, but again, they've always been heavy. If I may suggest a possible explanation, like carousels, hero images, people taking images straight from the designer, hot off of Photoshop, and just plugging it right into their website. Yeah?
So WordPress is a tool for resizing images down to the actual viewable size and not letting the browser do the scaling. And a lot of people are probably not taking advantage of that.
People are not taking advantage of built-in Photon. And that is exactly the kinds of things that I don't necessarily know about the ecosystem, which is great that, that we can share that information. So to that point, images could be optimized. The median savings, if we were to optimize these images, about 70K. We're not taking full advantage of image optimization. Same with like Gzip. There's more room for improvement here. But the good news is that we've made a lot of progress. We've halved the savings that were left on the table for image optimization in 2 years, and doubled the improvement of the rest of the web. So maybe more WordPress sites are using things like Photon, which is great news. Videos. Much better than before. The weight of videos has gone down. But there's a very long tail, like this 75th percentile. You can kind of see that tracking. It's kind of scary to see. 2,000K median video weight, less video than other sites. But it's increased 1,000%. Much faster growth. Wait, what was this one? That says median video weight. Oh, wait. So this is time series of image savings. Sorry, the top label is incorrect. Time series of image savings has gone down. This is a good stat. And the video weight, we've kind of seen more videos in use around this time. And again, the tail is very long, about like 5 megs. It's kind of scary again. 10 megabyte videos on pages. Keep in mind the 2G stat from earlier. Just remind yourself that users are on super duper slow connections. This is also, we're going to go through a few quick slides, and then it's going to get real. I promise you that. So the Chrome User Experience Report has 3 million origins in it, and this was as of January. It's a monthly data set, and there are about 4 million in the most recent one. But we did the WordPress detection a few months ago. And 27% of that 3 million, so we're kind of zeroing in on that 30% stat. 27% are detected as WordPress. When you look at those histograms and you just make 3 buckets, all of the first contentful paints, less than 1 second, more than 3 seconds, and everything in between, we call that fast, average, and slow. So the first contentful paint of WordPress is fast 20% of the time. compared to non-WordPress sites, it's fast twice as often. You may be tempted to say WordPress sites are slower, but it's more nuanced than that. So I have to be very careful in how I say it. So this is first contentful paint. It skews slower. DOM content loaded skews slower. Onload skews slower. And I think it's helpful to kind of like quickly go through and see the change. So I promised you it would get real. How do we perform? There are 85 attendees at this workshop from 36 companies. 27 of those companies are in the Chrome User Experience Report. This is what we look like. So what I did was I got a spreadsheet of attendees and company names, and I tried to find a representative website for each of those companies. So Google, I looked up developers.google.com. These are like the corporate homepages or websites for your companies. I'm not looking at the websites that you manage necessarily. But you can see that there is a kind of wide distribution. Some are really fast. More than 50% of first contentful paints are fast. I want you all to feel very anxious right now. Is this me? Am I slow? FCP, DOM content loaded, onload. Again, look at that change over time. So these are just your like corporate websites. One thing that's really cool that we can do is start to combine real user performance data with this synthetic data that tells us about how websites are built. If we take that first contentful paint, put it on its side, the fast stuff, the green bars, now they're blue, and we overlay the page weight for each of these websites, I'm kind of noticing a vague trend. The smaller the fast first contentful paint is, the more stuff the page loads. This is overall page weight. CSS weight. Now the middle has its JavaScript. I notice the JavaScript weight is like 3 megs in these outliers. Images. 12 megabytes of images towards the end. But again, like the sites in this area don't really have many of those outliers. They're pretty reasonable. So what I want you to take away is do less stuff, load faster. If we can find ways to do that using Photon, using Jetpack, whatever. So I mentioned that I'm just looking at your corporate pages. But somebody gave me a list of the websites that you manage. There are 559 of those. 216 of them are in the Chrome User Experience Report, or CRUX. And when we take the average of those, how does that compare to the WordPress average, or the, not anti-WordPress, but the opposite of WordPress, not WordPress? It's actually really close. The fast buckets are almost the same, but it's great to see that the slow bucket is not as dense. And when we stack rank them individually, this is what it looks like. It's kind of the same shape, which is really interesting, as just looking at your corporate pages. I wonder what this says about you as companies. You kind of make websites in your image, maybe. I don't know. But there's still like this real. OK, now I'm going to show you, similarly, I'm going to turn the fast on its side. This is kind of confusing. I'll try to walk you through. So it looks like the ball pit at McDonald's. But so we've taken page weight, image weight, JavaScript weight, CSS weight. and just plotted it. And this is the slow side, and that's the fast side. So the websites that have 5% first contentful page, fast first contentful page, have like 10 megabyte page weights. Again, what I want you to get out of this is if you squint long enough, by the way, this is a logarithmic axis because it was just impossible to put everything on one, normal one. So there are kind of 3 different parts to this. On the left, the slow sites have higher page weights. On the right, the fast ones, they're sparser, but they have lighter page weights. CSS under 10K, that's awesome. JavaScript around 15K, that's awesome. Only loading what you need. Keep in mind, these sites might not be doing very much. They could just be landing pages. They could be very simple, lightweight sites. But nevertheless, do less stuff, load faster. And everything in the middle here, it's really interesting to see how consistent it is. If you load a megabyte of JavaScript, maybe you can expect only average performance. OK. So that's how fast the ecosystem is. How do we move it forward? How do we improve the state? I take it upon myself to monitor the performance. This is my action item from this meeting. Track improvements over time, and if there are regressions, flag them. The community has many great resources, blogs. I'm launching a video series. I think today is the first episode of it, where I talk about the state of the web. And in this type of series, it would be great to bring up things like, hey, WordPress, you were getting better with image savings, but now you're going in the opposite direction. What happened? So we can, if we monitor things, we can improve it. I think it's important to celebrate performance. Create a culture of performance at your companies. If somebody's like, hey, we should have a carousel with 30 images on it, I want somebody to raise their hands and say, but what about performance? Maybe we should lazy load the images. How fast is that going to be if we do it? Just ask the question. Celebrate the performance success stories. Publish your case studies. If you improve performance and see business metrics improve, share that with the community. People who are maybe on the fence, or like their CEO is like, yeah, I heard about web performance, I think it's good, but why should I care? If they see that other people in the industry are having positive results, I think they'll be more inclined to also care and do something about performance. We need to reward performance. Praise in public. I was told I shouldn't say who those top performing sites were, but if you would like to know where you and your sites fall in that stack rank, come see me. I have the raw data. It's also publicly available data. Anybody can look this up. But I feel like these case studies and tools like Chrome UX Report, HTTP Archive, should do a better job of highlighting good examples of web citizenry, making websites that are good for users. We also need to incentivize developers. And this kind of flows into the next point, working with developers. Making it easier to build a fast WordPress site. What should I be doing? I'm a WordPress newbie. I've been on the web a long time, but I don't necessarily know about these tools and plugins. I think it would be awesome if we had a performance hackathon. Maybe we get the most popular WordPress plugin developers to come for a hackathon, and I give them this presentation, and instead of websites, I show them websites using their technologies, and maybe we could see, hey, plugin X, you're not doing a good job of this. What could we do to help you? Maybe that would move the industry forward. The plugin black hole. And finally, performance is just one part of the user experience picture. I could have shown you all of these stats for so many different categories like SEO, Accessibility, frighteningly enough. Security. The state of the web and the ecosystem is all about the user experience and what we can do as developers to make sure that our users are having positive experiences, because ultimately that affects our bottom line. Selling more stuff, showing more ads, making more money as businesses. So thank you. This is the one pager. If you'd like to take a screenshot for all these URLs. The slides, like I promised, bit.ly/WP VIP perf. Email me. My Twitter is my full name with an underscore in the middle. Send me a tweet or a direct message if you'd like to talk more about this. Thank you.